I just completed the OPI, or the Oral Proficiency Interview, in the target language of Spanish via a testing company called Language Testing International. I did it on the phone, took about 30 minutes. I wanted to talk about the structure and some of my thoughts on it. So the examiner begins in English to verify your identity and then switches to the target language pretty quickly. The first portion of the exam for me was, where are you living and can you tell me about it? How's the weather up there? So I talked a little bit about summers here and winters, and I asked him where he's from. We spent a few minutes commiserating about the harsh winters of the Midwest and Northeast here in the States. The second question that I received in this exam was, what do you do? Tell me about it. So I shared that I was a teacher. I talked several minutes about my school, about my students. I even shared a little bit about my philosophy in teaching, and he allowed me to speak for quite a bit before transitioning to the next section. The next question was, what do you do in your free time? So I spent a few minutes talking about what I like doing when I'm not at school. I talked about some of the sports I play and how I spend my weekends, really. The next portion was all about a past experience. So the examiner asked me if I had traveled, and I said, sure, I visited Spain last summer, and he was very enthused by that response because he himself was of Spanish descent. So he asked me to describe that trip to Spain. The examiner then wanted me to describe one specific event I had experienced while traveling. And I think the phrase he used was an experience that was memorable or surprising or difficult for you. So I would suspect that he was looking for me to talk about my feelings, how I was feeling, what was going on in my inner world during one of those maybe challenging experiences. I talked about a surf class that I had taken and how I had a lot of fun. I don't think I shared enough emotions, to be honest. The next section was like an agree, disagree. The examiner suggested that some exchange programs believe that the best way to learn a language is by immersing yourself in that language and in that country. What are your thoughts on that? Do you agree? The next portion of the test was very much can you give recommendations and advice to people, hypothetical people or real people? So the examiner asked me, what would you recommend, or what guidance would you give to students studying abroad in Spain? What do you tell them? And then finally, the role play portion. The examiner switched back to English, described the fake scenario, and then jumped back into Spanish to have me begin. My scenario was that the examiner and I were buddies, and that he had lent me his blender so that I could prepare some smoothies and mocktails and cocktails for an upcoming party. However, I broke his blender, and I needed to describe in detail what happened to it and how I planned on making it up to him. And then I really don't know if this was still part of the exam, but he was like, so what are you doing today, man? And I was like, I'm gonna just sit at my computer waiting for the results of this exam, honestly. I'm gonna be refreshing my email, my inbox every 15 to 30 seconds. And then I'm gonna find out that I have to pay more money to learn the specifics on why I got the rating that I got. Anyway, that was the OPI Spanish. I would take it again.